Hello, welcome everyone to our third session of this lecture series. I'm here as usual just for a minute or two introducing Massimo Riva, although Massimo Riva is known to many of you because he's a sort of standing key figure for the University of Modena, for our department. He is professor and chair of Italian studies and director of the virtual humanities lab at Brown University. He's also affiliated professor of modern culture and media, so involving all these skills. His teaching ranges from Boccaccio's Decameron to modern and contemporary literature, film, media, and digital humanities. He has held visiting positions at the University of Modena, the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, the University of London, the École des Hautes Études in Paris, University of Sydney, Australia. In recognition of his research-based teaching, he was nominated Royce Family Professor of Teaching Excellence. His awards and honors also include the Order of Merit of the Italian Republic with the rank of Ufficiale for his contribution to the dissemination of Italian culture in North America. He's been teaching there for most of his career. He has published several books on literary maladies and national identity, post-humanism, and the hyper novel, and literature in the digital age. He's the editor of the Yale anthology Italian Tales and co-editor of the Cambridge edition of Pico della Mirandola's Oration on Human Dignity. That's why he's a special friend to Modena. He was the recipient of 3 major grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities and Digital Innovation Fellowship from the American Council of Berne Society in support of various digital projects, now part of the Virtual Humanities Lab that he's director of. Among his recent collaborative initiatives, a series of interactive installations of the Garibaldi moving panorama were featured in libraries and museums in Brazil, in Italy, and in the UK. He's currently completing a digital monograph entitled Italian Shadows, The Curious History of Virtual Reality, a pilot project of the Brown Digital Publications Initiative, funded by a grant of the Andrew Mellon Foundation, to be published in 2021 by Stanford University Press. And we're looking forward to his presentation, his talk today. Thank you very much, Massimo. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Marina. Thank you very much. And it is a real pleasure to be virtually with you in Modena, and I hope that we can repeat this in real life, perhaps in the summer. My presentation today, in fact, and thank you for the introduction. My presentation today is based on my work in progress on the digital monograph that you just mentioned, and is an ideal continuation of the lecture that I presented last year in person at the summer school. And I'm going to share my screen and see whether this is happening. Can you see my slideshow?
Yes.
You can see it. Great, great. So for the past few years, 4 years as a matter of fact, I've been involved in an experiment, as Marina just mentioned, with a new form of digital publication, a digital monograph, which is the translation into a digital environment of what used to be the traditional physical support of a scholarly monograph, the printed book. And here are some of the properties that a digital monograph as a born digital scholarly long form and born digital form of publication should possess. It should be fully interactive and searchable online with primary sources and other works, portable across reader applications, capable of supporting metrics of use that respect user privacy. This is, of course, a very important issue nowadays. Maintained and preserved in its digital form, and preservation is another crucial aspect of digital publication, economically sustainable, both in terms of production and in terms of availability, high quality as judged by peers, so no different than traditional forms of publication, peer-reviewed, and so on and so forth. So the digital monograph I've been working on with a team of digital librarians, designers at the Brown University Library, and now to be completed by December 31st and published next year at some point by Stanford University Press, is not necessarily a narrative genre. Yet a narrative dimension is also part of its discursive strategy. And this is a little bit of the topic that I'm going to focus on in this conversation. So within the contemporary multimedia publishing environment, made possible by the internet and other forms of digital communication, also the scholarly monograph becomes, to some extent, a type of transmedia storytelling. My monograph consists in 6 case studies, and here these are screenshots from the actual monograph that I'm going to show you live later. It consists in 6 case histories, or epistemological tales, as I call them. So each case study is focused on an analog optical device that foreshadows fundamental features of our contemporary digital culture. So the Mondo Nuovo, or Pantoscope, the Camera Obscura, the Polemoscope and the Magic Lantern, the Phantasmagoria, the Moving Panorama, and the Stereoscope. So the main themes of the monograph are virtual travel or virtual mobility, and what I call social voyeurism, best exemplified by our social media platforms. And both are essential dimensions of the perceptual and cognitive virtual realism that pervades modern popular culture and or technoculture, and informs the genealogy of what I call the modern panoptic self. So this is a sort of a general description of the monograph. So all the objects and devices that are the protagonists of the epistemological tales or case studies are in fact virtualizing machines that simulate and model the world they represent. So they are analog machines, of course, but they possess this ability to produce a virtual or simulated version of the world. Most importantly, these devices belong to a peculiar dimension of pre-digital popular culture, in which experimental science, technology, and artistic practices converge or intersect to produce hybrid, immersive, quote-unquote, immersive experiences that, as I mentioned earlier, foreshadow those afforded today by digital apparatuses, virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality, and so on and so forth. The overall design of my project, and here we get to the specific features of this digital publication, is inspired by one of these devices, a magnificent exemplar of Venetian Cosmorama, or Mondo Nuovo, shaped as a teatro all'italiana, recently discovered in the game room of a historic Venetian country villa. I was present at the unveiling of this artifact in the Museum of Pre-Cinema in Padua that you know, houses the Zotti Minici collection. And I shot this short video. And so it's a very amateurish video, but it can give you an idea of this device and how it worked. Basically, you looked inside this this Mondo Nuovo, and what you saw was a kind of three-dimensional landscape enhanced by a system of lenses and also lighting features. So one fundamental idea drives both the design and the narrative, or my main argument of my digital monograph. Simulation as the mirroring effect between form and content. This is really the central concept that I will sort of focus on throughout this lecture. This is best exemplified by our simulation of the Mondo Nuovo, or pantoscope. So we built a 3D model of the Mondo Nuovo for the monograph that provides an ideal container for the interactive simulations of the other devices, as illustrated by this short video. And I hope now I can these are all animations from the simulations, and we'll take a look at some of them later during the presentation. It just gives an idea of how we created this resource for the digital monograph. Okay, so choosing simulation as both the narrative thread and the epistemological principle or framework, as well as the main design idea for the monograph, is entirely consistent with the possibilities offered by the digital publishing platform. And thus, in its design, Italian Shadows and its digital design mirrors to some degree the characteristics of the devices it studies, as the virtual jacket of the book, its landing page shows. Let me now move to the actual landing page of the monograph. The interactive digital simulations replace what in a print format we could call illustrations, and are meant to both demonstrate how these analog devices worked and allow the reader to experience, quote unquote, their performative, perceptual, and cognitive effects, something clearly impossible to realize in the printed format. And let me go back to my presentation. So each tale of Italian shadows provides both a reproduction and an interpretation of its virtual object. Through the windows open within its pages, quote unquote, the reader of Italian Shadows will be able to explore virtually digital versions of the artifacts that are the objects of the case studies. For example, explore Gian Domenico Tiepolo's painting known as Il Mondo Nuovo, play with a 3D version of a Mondo Nuovo, enter virtually an oversized camera obscura called the casotto, inside which one could look at the reflection of the world outside in the 18th century Venice. The reader will be able to experience the devious properties of a spyglass known as the polemoscope at the center of a play of the same title written by Giacomo Casanova, and travel to the bottom of the ocean in a magic lantern shadow play illustrating Casanova's sci-fi novel Icosameron. Here you see our team at work with the creation of the simulation based on the animation and the shadow play that we recreated thanks with to the contribution of an Italian artist. And here is some of the slides created. We have no illustration of the Icosameron, so we sort of illustrated the book with a magic lantern show. The reader of Italian Shadows will be able to visit a 3D reconstruction of the legendary 1821 exhibit of Pharaoh Seti I's tomb at Egyptian Hall in London, as conceived by the Paduan amateur field archaeologist and showman Giambattista Belzoni, and travel with the Italian national hero Garibaldi on his Sicilian expedition in 1860 through an English moving panorama from the same year. And finally, our reader will be able to take a stereoscopic mini grand tour of southern Italy, Naples and Sicily in particular, based Rome, Naples and Sicily, based on a kit from the turn of the 20th century. And this is what I like now to concentrate on, to give you an example of the transition from a very interesting analog publishing format to our digital format. The mirroring effect that I mentioned before between form and content, that is the overarching design idea behind Italian Shadows, is perhaps best exemplified by the last case study of the monograph, or epistemological tale of the monograph, which is focused on an Underwood and Underwood stereoscopic kit. Dating from the 1890s, this kit contains, in what looks from the outside like a book, as you can see here, a viewing and reading apparatus of a different kind. One which allows the readers, users, travelers, to travel virtually in space and time and have the illusion of being actually transported elsewhere, not only in their mind, but through their perception. Stereoscopic kits inaugurate a new stage in the evolution of virtual travel, which is the central topic of my curious history of virtual reality. From map to tour, to quote Michel de Certeau. So it is not difficult to see how the words of one of the spokesperson of the Underwood and Underwood firm, Albert Osborne, foreshadow the subsequent evolution of virtual tourism and the attraction of popular gadgets that combine a screen, an image interface, and unlimited access to information, all embedded within a geolocation network. The experience is that of being in the place itself, rather than an experience of being in our home, seeing a picture of the place. What Osborne was promoting in the early 20th century, indeed what he was marketing for as a spokesperson for Underwood and Underwood, a firm that was founded by two brothers from Kansas in heartland of America, is an early form of what has become common for us today when our quote-unquote experience of the world is thoroughly filtered through the devices that convey it. Osborne's approach was also part of a deliberate strategy to sell a product. The Underwood and Underwood kits, complete with special maps and books forming a travel system, as they called it, a patented travel system. The world in a box for the benefit of the American innocent at home, to paraphrase Mark Twain's famous Innocent Abroad collection of travel pieces. The panoptic character of virtual tourism is clear from its very early stages, embedded in all the gadgets or devices I mentioned, are the object of my monograph. Mondi Nuovi, Cosmoramas, Panoramas, they are all convey a virtual traveling experience. With the stereoscope, however, virtual travel reaches a new level. Representational techniques change in a technological way which is functional to the new cognitive forms that imperialism and or cosmopolitanism require from ever larger masses of people in an age in which the nationalization of the masses is also part of a broader globalization. And as you can read here, from every home, classroom, and students' room to the most important, interesting, and fascinating places throughout the world. In short, the Underwood and Underwood travel system is a real precursor of Google Maps and Google Earth. As the subtitle of Osborne's book suggests, the individual development provided by stereoscopic kits is also, quote, a promise for the spread of civilization, American civilization, that is. This is indeed a recipe for the Americanization already in progress, of which the Underwood and Underwood travel system, which peddles virtual travel as a form of democratic voyeurism, is a perfect example. Everybody should have access to these gadgets. Other gadgets, boxes, and other systems will come along to provide the same panoptic and voyeuristic illusion. As Wendell Holmes, the inventor of the portable stereoscope, prophetically wrote in 1859, I quote, "The time will come when a man who wishes to see any object, natural or artificial, will go to the Imperial, National, or City Library and call for its skin photograph or form, the stereographs, as he would for a book at any common library," end quote. From this point of view, the stereoscope exemplifies the relationship between its specific goals, the promotion of virtual tourism, and the general organization of knowledge, and also a kind of design for a publishing system. Holmes' library is also a kind of cosmorama. A century and a half later, the world in a box, of course, resides in everyone's handheld devices, distributed through social networks that condition and filter the wish to see any object natural and or artificial, which Holmes spoke in the mid-19th century. Yet, access to knowledge or information is still filtered through popular vision technologies. As Brooke Bliss writes, ideas of an infinite visual library, complete film, and comprehensive catalog of images are all forms of a fantasy that accompany the very idea of representation. She calls it database imagination, which is a kind of, anticipated, foreshadowed again by the stereographic imagination. that would presume the world exists as information, appearing as patterns of data and algorithms that can be recorded and processed as such, from analog to digital means. Today, virtual tourism is an emerging industry based on a combination of new networked virtual reality tools, immersive, quote unquote, tools, and social media, complete with algorithms and artificial intelligence tools that cater to each of us individually. Stereoscopic travel kits from such late 19th and early 20th century firms as Underwood or Keystone already provided a prototype of this experience in a comprehensive fashion. By the way, the current pandemic seems to have accelerated this trend, like many other visualization trends, including the virtualization of the academic lecture that we're experiencing right now. So what was initially conceived as a marketing tool for a real-life travel experience is becoming increasingly an end product, travel replacement rather than travel enhancement. So in a way, our monograph translates from the analog onto the digital apparatus the modular reading configured by the stereoscopic travel kit. Also, stereographic kits fostered a cognitive leap based on map, image, or postcard text combination. As I was saying, our simulation is largely based on this Underwood and Underwood kit, Italy through the Stereoscope, first published in 1897 and then re-edited several times afterward. And it appears from the outside like a leather bound book, yet as I explained before, it contains a complex viewing reading apparatus of a different kind. So the set of stereographs, 100 usually, the visor, maps specifically designed, as we'll see in a moment, Baedeker, and altogether the instructions, of course, how to use this system in a coherent way. So users of the Underwood kit could travel first on a printed map that marked the positions from where the views, the double photographs composing each stereograph, were taken. To complete the illusion, the guidebook provided an explanation of the view, effectively positioning the active viewer inside the image as the result of the double photograph. So the apparatus thus embedded the viewer, reader, into the image production system, and the viewer's experience of actually being there, as Osborne said, was therefore the result of a multimodal cognitive operation triggered by the apparatus. One of the Underwood brothers is portrayed in this picture, illustrating how the virtual kit should be used. His finger is pointing to the book. He's reading and the book, which is the Baedeker, the guidebook, and a map of Rome is open. You cannot see it, but there is a map is open beneath it. Behind him, the library shows the entire collection of different tours from around the world. So you could travel to Italy without leaving your living room, like you can do today on the internet. And in this particular case, these kits, such as, for example, Rome through the Stereoscope, are in essence an exercise in geographical imagination, as Douglas Clark writes in an essay devoted to a close analysis of the virtual experience provided by an Underwood kit of the Eternal City. 5 maps were included, I quote, 5 maps were included in the book, and these possess the richest nexus of text-image relationships, for the reader not only had to master map reading or learn how to read a map, but also reading the legend by which things were identified. And everything was, of course, functional to to the various components. The maps establish, again, the specific point of view of the stereographs, representing, I quote, the topological relationship between the viewer and the subjects inside a larger spatial context, like a Google map viewer. Once they have established their position on the map and oriented themselves, the travelers, readers, travelers can proceed to the street view of the stereographs. And the various chapters of the guidebook are organized and numbered, as you can see here, according to the positions of the camera from where the photographs were taken, which combined produce each stereographic view. And here you see the map with the, the positions and the field of vision clearly indicated, and which corresponds to the various descriptions through a numbering system and an explanation system to the sections of the guidebook. So our interactive simulation synthesizes, to some extent, this multimodal configuration, gathering all the elements within a single window on a Unity platform, and showing how the parallel operations of reading, mapping, and viewing are combined in what amounts to a cognitive and perceptual surrogate for an individually customized traveling experience. Complementing each other, the visual and verbal components of the virtual travel set produce a sort of transmedia auto-narrative experience, culminating in the visual immersion provided by peering into the stereoscope. So the simulation, the digital simulation, assemble all the different operations into an interactive, a series of interactive operations. Of course, this is simulating the apparatus, the analog apparatus. So let's go back to the previous slide for a specific example. What of our position here we read in the text corresponding to this position? So we are actually supposedly somewhere positioned somewhere here. Okay, position 6. I don't know if you can see, but. And this is the stereograph corresponding to the position. We are standing on a fairly high house top. And this is a quote from the guidebook, just to give you an example of how this works and how the writing synthesized some of the components of this travel system. As can be seen by comparing our elevation with those 5-story houses to the left of us, supposedly. Just beyond these houses, we catch a glimpse of the southern row of the colonnade, but only that part of it which is straight. Essential for both the perspective and the characterization of this view is also the figure in the foreground. The description of this figure is worth reading. We are glad, Ellis, which is the author of the guidebook, writes, we are glad to see this sun-blackened young Roman laundress, a very type of the land, in her striking a picturesque costume. So on the one hand, this figure helps us experience or have the experience of being there, looking, in person at this image. At the same time, it provides an additional, let's say, para-ethnographic type of information and make the experience of the place even more effective from this point of view, rather than simply a monumental view of St. Peter's. This is also part of my case study. I go specifically into this, but I won't do this in this lecture. But let's just read the rest of the quotation, because it's very interesting also to understand what kind of experience was conveyed through this system. The white muslin sleeves extend from shoulder to elbow, and some darker materials forms the deep cuff that covers the forearm and constitutes the waist. And could there be anything more light and airy than that unique sunshade which she wears on her head and which falls down over her neck and between her shoulders, thus protecting the back of her head from the fierce rays of the sun? End quote. Not by chance, Oliver Wendell Holmes, in his already quoted article from 1859 in the Atlantic Monthly, called stereographs sun sculptures and fossilized shadows. If photography inaugurated a new stage in the realistic virtualization of the world, the painting machinery of the stereoscope, as Holmes called it, produces an exchange between physical and perceptual properties. So the reduction of color to form, the chiaroscuro technique in which the sun itself is master, as Holmes writes, is in fact a play of shadows, positive and negative. The stereoscope makes these fossilized shadows tangible and come to life to some extent. A kind of vibrating spectral life takes shape in front of our eyes as we look through the contraption. A unique delineation makes of a stereograph a sun sculpture rather than a sun picture, as an ordinary photograph is, raising the photographic reality effect to a new level. Our simulation emphasizes how, as a multimodal tool, the stereoscopic kit required from the user a series of overlapping visual and cognitive operations, whether mentally traversing the map or using the map while actually in the city of Rome, as making the total experience a complex, multi-layered one. Sometimes some travelers, most equipped ones and more sophisticated one, would take the travel system kit with them and sort of find the position where the photograph was taken and sort of overimpose the virtual Rome to the actual view of Rome they had in front of them. Standing on the spot from where the photographs of the scene in front of them were taken, virtual tourists were actually in Rome or Venice, or could switch from looking at the scene with their naked eye to viewing the same scene through the artificial eye of the stereoscope. What they perceived in this combination of natural and artificial vision was a reality both augmented and substantiated by the apparatus, made more evident and tangible, including their sculptural and shadowy presence like that of our laundress here. So I'm going to switch to the simulation, which is still work in progress, just to show, let's see if I can, to show how, in order to remain faithful to the stereoscopic effect within a bidimensional container, the Unity window on the screen, here you see how this would actually, if this works, let me see. As I said, this is work in progress, and we're not quite done with this. These are the instructions about how to use this simulation. There is a short video introduction. You can interact with highlighted areas of the simulations through by clicking on them. You can change the current camera view. You can swap views seen through the stereoscope with main view, select the slides, and return to the help screen, which I'm going to do right now. So let's go to our let's go to our stereoscope. So we created the illusion of a three-dimensional space in a bidimensional screen, on a big dimensional screen, by using individual overlapping layers of two-dimensional art. So the bifocal vision that is behind the stereoscope is here sort of simulated through a technique. And this is one of the, I hope perhaps in the discussion we can go back to this, this solutions that we find in order to provide a simulation that again combined the different operation required by the reader viewer into an example, and thanks to digital, to an illustration, a demonstration, and also a quote-unquote experience, thanks to the digital platform. So let me go back to my presentation, and I don't know how am I doing in terms of time, but approaching our conclusions. In composing my monograph, conceived on a digital publishing platform, so trying to exploit the features allowed by the digital platform, I was, by remaining faithful to this fundamental idea of simulation as both the subject and the design principle of the monograph, I was obliged, I was compelled to shift the weight of my argument from its written to its visual components. So in order to rethink conventional illustrations as simulations consistently with the central topic, our simulations are meant to offer an example of how digital tools can enhance a scholarly argument in 4 ways. They are demonstrative, they demonstrate how those devices worked. Exploratory, they allow the user to interactively explore the mechanism. Performative, they perform a task and deliver a performance shaped on the historical examples of performance, Mondo Nuovo tour, Stereoscopic kit, the performance of a play, a painting, and so on and so forth. And they are interpretive. They provide an individual interpretation of a larger category of similar devices and performances. So like the word simulation, also the word performance is used here in 2 senses. In the common artistic sense of a musical, theatrical, or cinematic performance, and in a more technical sense, as in how a machine, whether analog or digital, is designed or programmed to perform a certain task. All our simulations are thus programmed to provide a digital performance of an analog performance based on a historical record, a virtual version of the kind of performances these popular spectacles made possible, so that the reader can perhaps better appreciate their appeal than a verbal description can allow. This also meant investing the written text with a new crucial function based on simulation as an epistemological principle. And here, let me go back for the last time to apologize for the phone ringing in the background, if you can hear it, but I'm gonna go back to here is the landing page. Here is the table of contents. Here is the first chapter. As we go to the chapter, readers of Italian Shadows have various options. They can read this digital monograph like a web page, or like a book, if you wish, and linearly or horizontally, as an illustrated book, chapter by chapter. Each image will have as SCADA, specific, and this is incomplete, but there will be metadata, there will be links to the sources, there will be links to additional resources, and so on and so forth for each of the illustrations you see here, citations, source files, etc. The reader will be able to read, as I was saying, the book or like a web page. There are some additional features like captions that can be looked at or hid or can be hidden, and also translations and the original text, etc. But the reader will have also the possibility of exploring more in depth the the scholarly argument, following its inevitable detours, subplots, and forays into the historical archive. So to interrupt the main narrative, if you wish, and go more in depth, as in a sort of a hypertextual way. We call it further insights. They are designed for a specific type of reader, which is the scholarly reader who is interested in the, in the discussion of scholarly bibliography and so on and so forth. Or the reader, the impatient reader, if you want, or the reader more interested into the narrative, can go back. So sorry, I'm going to have to go directly to the simulation, and this is how it appears live inside in the book, let's say. And here in this case it's a simulation of the Mondo Nuovo, which is the subject of this famous painting by Gian Domenico Tiepolo. There is an in-depth analysis and an interpretation of the painting, perhaps a new interpretation of the painting. Readers and scholars will judge, which is made possible by and not only illustrated, but also sort of supported by the simulations that we provide here. So our hope is that whatever the reading strategy the reader of the digital monograph will choose, the fully deployed narrative will enhance the interactive simulations, illustrating their critical goals, as much as the simulations with their interactivity will make the narrative and our argument not only more accessible and clear, but also more compelling. Let me go back once more and for the last time to my slide show. Yet we are also aware that a fundamental ontological shift is at work with the transition from an analog to a digital platform. A leap, cognitive leap, perceptual leap, already foreshadowed in the stereoscopic kit. And I read here, this is from one of the appendices to the guide book included in Italy Through the Stereoscope, which sort of makes some claims for the how much better is and how great innovation is this system that is provided. When all is said, we come at reality in books only through interpreted symbols by the power of our imagination and through the illumination afforded by our personal experiences. Books cannot furnish us with new perceptions of realities. But even the best pictures we still feel to be but pictures. They do not create the illusions of reality, solidity, depth. The best in this kind are but shadows. But with the stereoscope, the wonder of photography is brought to its culmination. So the transition from a symbolic to a perceptual interpretation of reality, in fact, disguises what in digital culture effectively underscores visual perception and personal experiences. Code with its unlimited power of manipulation and simulation, limited in the sense in which Umberto Eco spoke of unlimited semiosis. So our curious history of 3D vision and immersive, my curious history of, I say our because it is, as you can imagine, a real collaborative effort, endeavor, and which involves many people in addition to the author. The curious history of 3D vision and immersive experiences, which Italian Shadows intends to contribute to, is a long and fascinating one. From Leonardo da Vinci's observations about light bodies and shadows as applied to painting, to Whitson's invention of the stereoscope in the 19th century and Holmes' development of it. So the desire to go deeper into reality and to escape reality altogether has shaped two sides of a unique human experience. So as a digital monograph, Italian Shadows is itself a kind of augmented or extended reality book, if you wish, realizing, thanks to our current technologies, an aspiration already clearly expressed in analog systems like the Stereoscopic tour of Italy, which is the object of the last chapter. So stereoscopic vision seems to liberate men, humans, from the formal constraints of monocular perspective, while realizing the dream embedded in it of a virtual window and a virtual mirror capable of reflecting the world in all its dimensions. As we have seen, the claim that a new technology is capable of bringing us much closer, more in depth into reality, into the past, actually, into an understanding of the past, as the effort is here, is not new. However, we should never forget that our cognition of the world, whatever the tools we adopt to view it, represent it, interpret it, is always already a kind of simulation, as Jeremy Lanier reminds us in a book that I suggest, final suggestion as a reading, perhaps at the dawn of the new everything. Thank you very much. This is the end of my lecture, and I'll be happy to, I'll stop sharing. I'll be happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Massimo. Perhaps we might say that I think Massimo is open to questions in Italian as well, should there be anyone who feels more comfortable with.
Prof, c'ho l'audio spento.
Sorry, silly me. I meant to say that perhaps students can ask questions in Italian as well, if they feel more confident with Italian. I think there have been lots and lots of suggestions. I was also saying that I really appreciated the way, perhaps I'll start with one question and then the rest will come. I particularly appreciated the way you developed the contribution of the visual elements to argument, the sort of demonstrative, exploratory, performative, and interpretive contribution. I wonder, however, a bit provocatively, I wonder how far it seems to be a problem with telephones ringing. I wonder how far this depends on the fact that the visual dimension is so central to the object of the study, and the notion of simulation is so central to the object of the study. What do you think? Does it contribute?
I mean, yes, no, I clearly I chose to share with you the specific experience that I and the work in progress. But of course, this is only one example of the many possibilities that a digital monograph as a born digital form might have, depending on the subject matter. That, in my case, it was almost inevitable, since I deal with a sort of a media archaeological perspective on visual culture and popular visual culture, etc. It was quite inevitable to focus on that aspect, and but that was also the challenge. I mean, the challenge is to find the best possible format and the best possible use of the tools that digital publishing affords us in order to specifically adapting them to the subject matter. There are so many different examples of how one can use other feature of other digital tools, but I think this was perhaps one of the main things I wanted to emphasize, that there should be an effort in designing this new publishing formats to actually make them coherent. I spoke of form and content. I could have spoken of the code underlining, or again, I could have I could have tackled this from the different points of view. But I mean, I think I hope that the point that I was trying to make is clear enough. That it's not enough if we really want to translate the monographic form into a born digital format, we need to make an effort to think it through from also an epistemological point of view. I see there are some chats, but I don't know. Oh, okay. I have a question through the chat. I don't know if I can read it from Angelicia. Hello from Malaysia. Wow. And the question is, would you consider what time is it in Malaysia? By the way, I have to ask my students often. I have a student who is taking my class on actually conspiracy theory and paranoia in digital culture right now, which is a very hot topic here in the States. And the student is connecting from China, so she doesn't sleep at night in order to connect, because we are exactly anyway. So hello from Angelicia, and would you consider digital monograph as a new genre on its own, or is it a book scholarly work recontextualized via a digital tool? It's 11 p.m. All right, so it's not too late. Well, both. I think it's interesting. Exactly, I was mentioning that before. I was kind of answering that question. Each digital monograph is a kind of a genre of its own. Like every work of digital literature to some extent is a genre of its own, although we can also talk, and Kate Hales, for example, has written about genres of digital literature of, from hypertext to flash poems and so on and so forth, the evolution. But basically, every work is reshuffles, recombines elements of and tools of digital to produce rather something that is standardized to some extent, because we use standard tools. The Unity simulations are based on a tool that is probably the most the most prominent tool in terms of, particularly in the area of computer games and so on and so forth, but simulation in general, 3D simulation, 3D modeling, etc. But at the same time, you need to pay attention to standards, because you want your final product, your digital monograph, to live on. At least we live in times of planned obsolescence. I mean, who knows? A new version of the Unity platform might not allow the simulations that we are spending so much time and so much effort to create to be accessible, and browsers might not allow, and so there are many considerations to be made in terms of the sheer preservation of this. So on the one hand, yes, it's a genre of its own. Digital as a digital monograph, Italian Shadows has some features that are peculiar, specifically designed for it. At the same time, it has to to consider the larger context, and also the larger technological context in which it is going to be. And this is part of the job of the Stanford University Press. Brown will secure the preservation of the digital monograph. Let's say that in 5 years, browsers have changed to the point that this particular product is not accessible anymore. As such, we'll have a full documentation in the Brown Digital repository that will allow to access it, including the softwares that we used in order to produce it. Another question, I don't know if you, Angelica, if this is, Magdalena, how many people are involved in the production of such a book? Who has the ultimate control of the final product, the author publishing house? Well, that's a very interesting question, because there are 3 partners in this venture, and the partners are, let's say, the author, which should be me. As I say, should be, because we'll see in a moment that that's is not entirely so. The team of specialists, and including designers, including, for instance, the studio that we hired as an external consultant to create the simulation, and we are working with them. They are, of course, they are specialists in this kind of product, and a library team that will allow, for instance, access to the digital monograph. For instance, for people who cannot see, how can we make work which is so much focused on visual perception, etc., accessible for people who have, different able people, as we say, So, and that we're trying to do that, and we're trying to do. Of course, it's going to be a textual type. We'll use some techniques, the most advanced textual descriptions of what you're supposed to see and experiment. But that's a big challenge. A challenge that certainly a single scholar cannot meet. I mean, in short answer to your question, a digital monograph, all forms of born digital publications are collaborative team efforts. There is no question about different expertise, different. Who owns the rights? Who owns the rights? Well, that's a very interesting question. Recently, we signed a contract between me, Brown, and Stanford University Press. The press will provide the imprint, the official imprint. Stanford University Press, which has a collection of digital monographs already well established, will provide let's say basically the official imprint of this. But of course, as an author, as an individual author, I had to release my rights to the Brown Library, which is the effective producer. Okay, so I'm the author. The producer in the contract is going to be Brown University. The contract is effectively going to be between Brown University and Stanford University Press. I won't see any royalties because this was already expensive enough to produce that Brown made an investment of this, and this is going to be open access. So no, you will be able to access this without paying for it, or at least this is something that I hope will happen. The Stanford won't charge you for this. So it's a very interesting new business model, also for publishing that. There are other questions. I don't know if this answered the question. Hello from Nottingham. This is still Magdalena. Does it take much longer to produce? Well, I've been working on this for 3-4 years, and the book was written, and I had to rewrite it several times to adapt, as the simulations were coming along, etc. As I try to explain, but it will take about 4 years to produce, which is some books take longer, clearly to be published. But this includes the research and includes also all the aspects of the design, etc. I have another question from Angelo Riccioni. He says, I was wondering if you consider studying also some kind of late 19th century jewels too, such as Stanhope pendants and stick pins. They were used by late Victorian people, and they feature painted lenses, yes, as in Magic Lantern slides to show famous landscapes and landmarks. Of course, I mean, my survey of visual forms, analog visual forms, and studied as a sort of a foreshadowing digital hour. It's limited to to mainstream, let's say, there's things that, but there are so many examples, there are so many examples, and some are mentioned in not the pendants and stick pins or the cameos or so on. I mean, there are so many examples of this miniaturization of landscapes and the fact that monili and jewels could be used also as a portable visual gadgets to some extent. So I won't go too much into this, but as far as the chat is concerned, those are all the questions I see for now. I don't know if I answered them all, but it looks to me like
Any other questions or comments from anyone? Just use the chat or use your microphone.
Can I ask just a very quick question? I was wondering about the affordances of the digital format, because it allows technically for a text to be accessed also in different languages, provided that it is translated. So is that an issue that you have considered, that of having it translated, like taking on the team maybe a translator and making it available in different languages? Or did you just assume that since it is in English, that could perfectly work as a lingua franca of let's say for an international readership?
Right. Well, of course, since I teach in the States, and this was a venture here specifically designed for to promote scholarly publication, a new kind of scholarly publication within the American system in particular. of course, I had to write in English, and so all the primary sources are translated, as I said. But yes, I hope that I'd be able to produce an Italian translation, for instance, of the whole thing, if there is a publisher maybe interested in working on a vision. Of course, this entire, the contract, like for a regular book, assigns royalties, etc., to the publishing house. So this will be done, or should be done, if any translation comes up. Any possible translation will be done in concert with Stanford University Press. I mean, this is not true only of translation, but also of derivative works. Because, for instance, the simulation, something I should have said during the lecture, the simulations are a compromise. I don't know if this was clear to some extent. I mean, I had to produce 3D simulations of these experiences adapted to a 2D format, a reading format, which is, the screen. This is clearly adaptation for the screen. Unity, but the simulation can be experienced. The simulation we produce can be experienced in a different way, with visors, etc. So they could be real three-dimensional experiences. So they cannot be packaged with a book as such, or at least we haven't considered that for now. I keep calling it a book, because it is still a transitional form between book and. But of course there could be derivative works, not only translation also in the sense of installations based on the simulation in museums and galleries, etc. That so pieces of the book, some of the case studies could be also reconceived, retooled, reconfigured as exhibits, as something that. So I mean, there are many possibilities, and translation, of course, I teach Italian studies in the United States, so I'm keenly aware of the problem of translating everything to English and making of English necessarily the lingua franca for everything we do, and dealing with Italian sources, Italian historical artifacts, etc. It's even more. The effort is already made by me, is translate in the text, etc., to make sense. But translation is certainly a broader concept, when we talk about these formats, and it has to also because the evolution of technological tools and conceivably of scholarly forms will continue. This is a first stage. We are in a very early stage. So we have all to be engaged in this kind of translation, which is, at multiple level, linguistic, cognitive, etc. So this is very much part of the experience that but yes, I hope to be able to share the whole monograph at least in Italian. We're talking about in Chinese. There is a possibility in Chinese, which is very interesting already, and we would need some good translator would understand also the style and the way that this is written in function also its visual apparatus. Thank you for the question.
Thanks.
Any other question or comment? Well, if not, I think we've used Massimo's time quite a lot, and we've really received a lot. So we have to thank him again, and really look forward to seeing you in Modena, hopefully, if the world starts working again, at the summer school next year.
Great, thank you very much. And actually, I hope to be able to show the final product maybe at that time. We can do a third installment of the history of this project. But thank you very much for inviting me, and delightful to be with you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.